I would like to welcome everyone. As always, we start with our movie about the Promised Land, about the movie made by a famous Polish director, Andrzej Wajda, who is also received the Oscar for all of the great production he done, but that was one of the major importance, showing how the Łódź city was developed and how fast was developing and how much of opportunities those city was done for many people over the past 2 centuries. And we saying that we have the best examples of the startups here in Łódź, because the Łódź city could be recognized as one of the fastest startups as a city over this part of the world. And that's, we need to use our historic tradition, how to create the new opportunities for the young and challenging people who would like to join the changing the city. And that is our honor to have the special guest for today's meeting, Mr. Dave Perry. And that is due to cooperation with Technical University of Łódź in the Lodz School of the Revitalization. Thank you, Grzegorz. I would like to ask you for saying also a few words about our meeting today before we start the presentation of Dave.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good to see so many people today. I'm here, as Jan said, somehow representing Łódź University of Technology. But I think mainly I'm representing a growing Łódź ecosystem. It's still immature, we are aware of that. But looking around here and myself working at the university and seeing the potential of young people and the enthusiasm they have and the skills they have, and I could clearly say that we have a great potential as an ecosystem. All we need to do, in my opinion, is to cooperate, because we have many different institutions dispersed around the city. And the main thing is to merge the potential, to use the synergy effect. And once we started with Ziemia Obiecana, the Promised Land movie, I could refer to the quote from this movie, probably the most famous one. There were 3 entrepreneurs, one from Poland, one from Germany, and one with Jewish roots. And they were telling, I have nothing, you have nothing, he has nothing, but all together we have just enough to build a big factory. So I think this shows the power of cooperation, and that's what we need to refer to this Łódź spirit here.
Yeah, that's we should come back to this spirit that people was moving here, and we would like also reverse the demographic situation, because generally speaking, in central Poland we have quite a big decrease in the population. Mm-hmm. The young people is moving to the other places, Warsaw, abroad, to Ireland, Irish, looking for the opportunities. We think that we need to find the new magnet which takes the people again here, that will find the new opportunities to develop all of the promises done by the land in the past, and we would like to reverse the situation at the present time. And we have and glad to have Dave here, that giving us some examples from the US and I think global examples, which will show us towards which direction we should think a little bit to change our minds, that we need to create the ecosystem. Not one will create the ecosystem for us. We need thinking how to create the ecosystem that is growing and how to match all of the potential Grzegorz was telling about. That's Dave, please, will be a pleasure.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So,
yeah,
it's a real pleasure to be here with you today. So just before we get started, I just want to tell you that my home now is in Austin, Texas. And I think there's a lot of commonality here, you know, between the 2 cities. And I've certainly seen that. I first really started going to Austin in the 70s. and it was just a little college town. It was the capital of Texas, so you only had politicians and academics there. That was it, right? And since then, I think at that time Austin had a couple of 100,000 people or so. Now Austin is, if not the fastest, one of the fastest growing cities in the United States. There's more than 1,000,002 people in the area there now. And I can verify that because I run into every one of them on the road every day. You know, traffic is horrendous. But it's been really remarkable to see the transformation there that occurred, and then to go back and study, you know, what caused that, you know, what contributed to that sort of growth there. And I think you said it right. It's about the cooperation of the community, right? A common purpose, you know, to make a better place, a better society, principled, you know, growth of the city. And so we've got a big university there, University of Texas. You know, there's 60,000 students there that keep it young and fresh, and they come from all over the world, you know, to Texas. And Austin is it's a beautiful place. If you've never been there, I'd invite you to come. It's hot, you know. We've got snakes, we got spiders, we got coyotes, we got lots of things like that. But we got lakes as well. We've got hills, and it's a very nice community.
You have some of the best music festivals.
Music, live music, and it's a little bit like your movie. The symbol for Austin, or the slogan for Austin, is "Keep Austin Weird."
Exactly.
You know, and people embrace that. You know, it's just a strange little thing. You can walk. There was a man. Unfortunately, he was a homeless man, but his name was Leslie, and he wore lingerie every day on the streets. And he ran for mayor of Austin, and so he actually had votes. People voted for this guy. Just, you know, it's not necessarily a great example of the civic duty there, but it just shows that kind of weirdness there. And unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. Now, on what we call 6th Street, which is like the bars and the young people go, and restaurants and bars and things like that, they actually have a statue of Leslie at this place. And it's a very, you know, weird place, but it's a great weird place. And a large part, you know, back in the 70s, we wanted the name Silicon Prairie, right? Because, you know, in Texas is a big state, and there's lots of empty space there, and we weren't Silicon Valley. But there were semiconductor companies that came in. And so my first employer, and I'll share this with you in a moment, was Texas Instruments. And TI had put a plant there, and Motorola had a plant there. And there's several other companies that set up operations there. And that was kind of the beginnings of the tech scene in Austin. Well, of course, all the fabs have long ago moved away. And so the company, or the city has migrated, as you see, from technology to technology along the way. And first it was semiconductors, and then it became, you know, web development, and then it was gaming, and now it's exploded into lots of different areas. And it's because we've got this great community of scientists and business people and entrepreneurs and even the politicians there that are focused on the growth of the city, that collaborate pretty regularly and develop this really inclusive community there that makes it easy for startups to be successful there. We don't have quite the depth of venture capital that Silicon Valley has, but we've got everything else. And I'll share some of the things there. But I see similarities between Łódź and Austin there. And so I want to encourage you to keep this attitude, this motivation to develop this great community here. And it doesn't matter. I mean, Austin is a little place in the middle of Texas. It could have been nothing, but it's grown into something. And if we had a sister city, it probably should be Łódź. Maybe we should pursue that as well. But one of the things that originally happened that I think is important too was There was a person named George Kaczynski, right? And he was a successful entrepreneur himself. He became the dean of the business school in the University of Texas. And he had this idea that entrepreneurship was something that actually could be studied and taught, and you could study it almost as a science. That before that, it was like you were assumed to be born an entrepreneur. You couldn't create an entrepreneur. And through the work, he formed the IC² Institute, which you may be familiar with. They did a lot of scholarly research. They published papers. And I today do consulting with IC² Institute. And we work with companies all over the world to try to identify promising new technologies and companies that we can help commercialize. And it's kind of tedious because we keep lots of data at each step along the way, but it's a research university, it's a research institute as well. So we captured a lot of data about what makes a successful startup and what failure, modes can contribute to that. And so from that institute, there were people that then formed the first incubator. It was the Austin Technology Incubator that still exists today. And it was run by the university. And that was one of the first places that companies could come and get access to mentorship and office space and tools and technology and so forth. And today, like most institutions, they're trying to find their way. Where do we go next? Because now they've proven that model out, and there's so many other private incubators and accelerators that it's like, well, what's next? How do you keep reinventing yourself there? Because they led the way, they showed the possibilities, and then other people came in and filled the gaps. Other entrepreneurs came in and filled the openings there, filled that role in society. And so I think the university's responsibility really is to always stay out in front, right? Once you've proven something and demonstrated it and got people involved in it, keep moving on. Keep out there at that leading edge. So I would even question, is it appropriate now for that institution to exist? Because there's other things that are doing that very well. Move on to a bigger problem. And you'll see this as part of my theme here is about always tackling large problems. And so, also I was asked to speak today about shiny objects, and I thought about that, and I think you'll find that I won't have a separate slide that says shiny objects, because I think this phenomenon affects everything that we do in business and particularly in the startup community. And so I want to weave this throughout the entire presentation that we do today. And so let me just jump right into it here. Okay, just a little about me, so you know who I am. This was me when I was a very young man. My ears at that age were the same size as today, so I've grown into my ears. And I was born in Hazard, Kentucky. So you talk about a city that had a population that was departing. This was it. This was in the mountains of Kentucky. It was a coal mining area. I came from a family of coal miners. My dad was a coal miner, but he also became the first entrepreneur really in our family, in that he started a grocery store. And I recall when I was little, I thought this was a huge grocery store. And my father, unfortunately, passed away very early. And when I went back for his funeral, I went back to that store and been there for many, many years. And it was like, like a convenience store. It was very small, right? And it shows you that, that's one of those lessons I learned is about your perspective on things, how it changes throughout your life, right? And same thing in lots of other situations too. Your perspective changes as the situation changes. No one in my family had ever gone to college before. And in fact, after high school, the idea of going to college, it didn't even occur to me. You know, it wasn't something we talked about or anything, because nobody had ever done it before, so the question wasn't even asked. And so my first experience after high school is the military. I went into the Air Force. And I was very fortunate to be moved into a position, it was a technical position in communications. I was doing cryptographic systems in the Air Force. And it really challenged me, you know, the schooling. It was a one-year school to learn this. And so it really challenged me in a lot of ways. And this is where I learned my first lesson about mentorship. Now in the military, you don't get a lot of mentorship, you get a lot of direction usually. But there was a lady, an elderly lady at our education center on the base that I was at. And she chewed my ass out, excuse my language, about what are you doing with your life? You know, why aren't you pursuing an education? Should, you know, take this opportunity. And she's the first person that really opened my eyes about doing bigger things, you know, and expanding myself. And she had no personal stake in that. She was only thinking about my interest. And that has stayed with me for really my entire life, because she really pressured me. You know, I almost enrolled in my first college class just to make her get off my back, right? And now I look at the impact that she had on my life, and probably a lot of other people, young men my age, because it was mostly men at the time. And so I thank her every day, and I'm sure she's passed away many years ago, but I thank her every day for what she contributed to me. And so now I try to also give that back. I try to be a mentor, and that's another message that I want to share with you too, is the thing that makes a startup community successful is mentorship. Okay, passing these skills, this knowledge, these scars, these experiences, these connections, relations, down from generation to generation to generation. And if you look at the success of Silicon Valley, you can point to a big reason for that is because you've got multiple generations of entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs that, yes, they've got capital because they've had successful exits, you know, that they become angels and venture capitalists and so forth. But it's more about the knowledge and skills and the motivation and the you know, the support that they provide to that community. And so if that's not a strong component of what's happening in Łódź, I would really encourage you to develop that. Encourage the people that have been there, that have done that, had successes and failures, and bring them into your mentorship program. Get them involved in your incubators and accelerators, and form angel groups. And even if it's not a large amount of money, that's a support network for all those entrepreneurs that are going to be risking their careers and their lives and their savings and their families and everything else to take this risk. Okay? So I went to college, graduated with a bachelor's degree. I studied math and computer science, but my degree was in education. I went to graduate school, both on the technical side. So I started my master's in math and computer science, but at some point I decided that I was probably a better business person than a real technical guy. And so I got my MBA degree while I was working at Texas Instruments. I was there for 20 years. And then I went to the advanced management program at Harvard. So, you know, to me it was like, I'm very humbled that here this little boy that grew up in a coal-mining community, never thought about going to college, was even allowed to be on the campus at Harvard University. And I loved Texas Instruments. Texas Instruments was a great place. It was a great culture. They never hired people that were experienced. Every year we would go college recruiting. We'd hire people right out of college. We'd train them very well about the TI way, you know, and they would go up through the system, and it was a really unique culture that fit me very well. But TI was an engineering company, you know. Even the salespeople were called sales engineers, right? And our method of developing products was really simple. You'd let the engineers just go play do whatever they wanted to do, come up with ideas, and then when something would pop out of the laboratory, they would come to guys like me and say, okay, how do we sell this thing? Is there anybody that wants to buy it? And having that be my only experience, I thought, oh, that's kind of the normal course of things. But now I realize that it's kind of backwards, right? It's not kind of backwards, it is backwards. You know, you really have to start with the problem and work back to it. But engineers like toys, they like doing fun stuff. So I recall one experience when they came to us and they said, okay, we've got this little semiconductor device that's got all these mirrors on it, right? And they're really tiny mirrors, and they can move. We can change through electrical current the movement of these mirrors, so we call them deformable mirrors. And the device was a DMD, deformable mirror device. Boy, that's an exciting technology, isn't it, right? And so we were trying to, okay, how do we do something like this? And so one of our businesses, we were really big into serving the airlines, you know, different technologies for airlines. And airlines needed a new ticket printer, you know. But remember the old red ink that would get on your shirt because you'd have 10 parts of forms there? And then they were going to the new cards, right? And they needed printers to be able to print that. Thank you very much. And so we actually made a ticket printer as a laser-based technology, but it used that DMD chipset to be able to form the imagery, you know, and direct, you know, the actual printing of the cardstock. And so, and it was a prototype. It, you know, you would get lines in it because the mirrors would stick and they would fail and all kinds of bad things would happen. And I'm worried about that. I was like, really, the deformable mirror? How many uses for that? Well, they changed the name of it. You may be familiar with it. It's called DLP, right? And it became a very successful technology for, you know, the video, movies, films, all that sort of stuff. So every theater projectors, this is probably a DLP projector here. So this was very successful. It finally found its way after years and years and years of development into all these products and became a massive success. And so that's one of those other things that I was left with, is that matching of technology. Finding that right product market fit is absolutely critical, of course, as you all know, in any sort of development. Other things so TI sold the business off to Acer. I went 1 year to Acer, and I didn't really enjoy the company culture there. And this was in the 90s. And so when I left, I thought, okay, what do I want to do next? Another big company, or should I go try to do a startup? And so we did a startup. I moved my family to Seattle, Washington. They hated me for 3 years because it rained every day that we were there. But we formed it. There was a startup that was called Avocent. It was perfect timing, you know, which is now my next lesson or thing I'd like to pass on, the importance of luck and timing in decisions, right? Things that happen there. The difference between an idiot and a brilliant person is often based on luck or timing. And so we had the right products for the data center business. As PCs were transferring into, you know, servers, going into racks, going into labs and data centers, we had a product that would allow that to happen. It was hardware and software that would allow remote management of a data center. So you can put all the hardware in a room like this and lock the door, turn the air conditioning down, turn the lights off, let it run, and keep the humans out. Because anytime humans get involved in the computer room, bad things happen. You know? And so we grew the company over several years. We had both our brand products, so we sold our products all over the world for distribution. So one of my roles then was to go develop all of our distribution channels around the world. It's really the first time I spent any time in Europe to speak of, and I was over here working first in the UK. We set up an operation in Ireland with our international headquarters for tax reasons, to be quite honest with you, and language. And then same thing, we went to China, and we went to Singapore, and we went to Japan, and we went to Australia. And so eventually we had operations all over the world. We were the #1 company in the space. We had intellectual property that we protected. It allowed us to sell our products. We had hardware products that we made 70% gross margin on. It was extremely profitable. So profitable that our OEM customers were really angry with us most of the time because they were selling their servers for 30% margin or maybe less. And here this little supplier that had the only solution that was really viable because we had made it very sticky. And so we sold the company after 10 years that I was there to Emerson Electric for $1.2 billion. And so that was a very successful company, and the reason it was so successful was because of me. I knew everything about it now. It was my personal commitment that made this company successful. At least I thought that was the case, right? And so what do you do? How do you follow up a big success? No, big failure. So yes, I thought I had the magic touch, which is another thing I would warn you about, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we attribute success to ourselves, and we contribute or put failure to the market or somebody else or whatever like that, right? And so you need to also be cautious, and as you're mentoring and coaching other people, make sure that people really understand the cause and effect of things, right? The company, yes, I contributed, but no, I wasn't responsible for that success. But when I formed my software company, Tinduit, I had this brilliant idea that I know this data center business better than everybody, right? And so I don't have to talk to customers. I know what they need, right? And so I can just go develop my product, do it, bring it to market, voila, another sale, right?
Yeah.
And so I took advantage of some technology that was available. It was these embedded processors that were built into servers. So I implemented a similar system to what Avison had, but I did it purely in software, right? So my marginal cost was zero, right, compared to building hardware. And I was going to go put this company we had sold for $1.2 billion, I was going to put them out of business, right? That was my game plan. And I did a really good job of making the solution. I mean, there were some technical hurdles that we were still wrestling with. But what I didn't see was the real competitor wasn't Avison. The real competitor was a new technology, a disruption that was coming from below, called Amazon Web Services. Right? You're familiar with Amazon AWS? So Amazon had to have all this capacity for computers to run their retail operations, but there's peaks in there, so they had to build over capacity to meet the peaks. So what did they do? They came up with this great idea: is we'll sell that extra capacity on a service basis. So now you can rent your data center, you can buy it as a service rather than building your own. So my customers evaporated, my potential customers evaporated. It was a horrible failure, right? So I was very humbled from this experience. And, but I learned, you know, when I think about the 10 years I was with Avison, what I learned from that experience, and then the 3 years that I was with Tinduit, I learned more from the failure, really, than I did from the success. And it's important to you. Success requires failure, right? And part of the community here about startups is you have to be accepting of that. It can't be a shame, you know, when someone fails. You have to find a way to embrace that failure, learn from it, make sure you learn from it, go through a strong process of understanding what contributed to that, so you don't repeat those same mistakes again. And that's where this mentorship can pass it on from generation to generation. So after that, I tell people that I retired after that, but I did it for 1 week, and I was so bored. I didn't know. I thought, I can't do this. I can't get up every day and go outside and relax or read a book or go play golf. This is in my blood. I love this too much. So that's when I started teaching at Acton School of Business. And Acton is a pure entrepreneurship MBA program. It is Socratic. It's case study, which means I'm a professor there, but I'm not allowed to lecture. In the 4 years I've taught there, I've never used a slide. It's all case discussion, and I'm only allowed to ask questions. But what it does is it doesn't teach, a set of principles in the traditional way, but it teaches critical thinking. So this is the other takeaway that I would like to leave you with is you've got a technical university here, you've got a lot of brilliant scientists here, and they have to be paired up with critical thinking business people as well, right? And I'll have some slides on this a little bit later, but business people alone, failure. Technical people alone, often from a commercial standpoint anyway. You may have a technical success in that you've achieved your patent, you achieved your goal, your experiment worked, but the real question is, can you commercially make this a successful product? And that's where the combination of those two come into play. And so having organizations like Acton and UT's got their MBA program, so we generate, along with all these brilliant developers and scientists, we create a lot of business people too, and we force the pairing of the two. You've got to build a team. No individual, no core group of people can work together unless you have that sort of a mix, in my opinion. And then I think I mentioned, I also do consulting with the University of Texas on their global commercialization program. We go internationally. I was in Korea, I think 6 times last year, where we go identify companies that are Korean companies that have some product, and we help them map that to market needs in other parts of the world and identify market strategies and actually go help them recruit companies to license their product or become a distributor or a partner, or in some cases venture or joint ventures or alike. And then we have an accelerator in Austin called Capital Factory. It's the largest one in Texas, really. We've got 400 companies there in our facility. We got 3 floors of a pretty big building, and we've grown. 300 of the companies in our incubator program, and 100 companies are in the accelerator program. And we have some really great companies in there, but they're mostly companies that are bootstrapped, maybe some seed stage money. When I go do my office hours, I meet with the companies, every month. And the one common thing is we need money, so they're all looking for some venture capital or whatever. Austin's great. It doesn't have deep venture capital, but it's got lots of angels that will contribute small amounts to get companies to the next stage of development there. So we're looking for companies that can get to commercial product customers on less than $1 million of investment capital, or less. And then I do my own consulting, private companies or governments or universities or whatever. I teach. I do lots of things under that banner. But I'm one of those people. You talk about shiny objects. I'm a subject of that. I do so many things. It's hard for me to describe what I do, but I do a lot of things that I enjoy, all of them. And this is my family. So I've got 2 boys. One lives in London, and he's going to come to Krakow on Friday night, and so he's going to enjoy Poland. This is my first trip to Poland, by the way, so I'm so excited to be here. It's been great. The people have been warm and friendly, and I've had nothing but positive experience. And now I'm really glad my son's going to come and join me and get to experience a little bit of it as well. So with that, we move on and say, you know, one of the things I'll talk about is what's an entrepreneur. And in the tech community, sometimes we always think about tech entrepreneurs. But an entrepreneur can come from anybody. It's the risk taker, the person that's going to go out there and find a problem and solve a problem. And it doesn't matter if it's a real technical thing, or in the case of retailer or the plumber that's got the interesting door design there. But it's about people that risk themselves, risk their career, risk their capital to go solve people's problems, and they get rewarded from it, both emotionally, professionally, as well as monetarily. And so in many cases, technology is just a tool to solve a problem. So what is a tech? You know, when I look at Capital Factory and the 400 companies there, how many of them are tech companies? If you're a website developer or mobile app developer, are you really a tech company? Some think they are, but and the question really should be, does it matter?
This is a service provider much more.
Yeah. And because, you know, a lot of the companies today aren't like they were 20 years ago, where you're inventing things, you know, you had to get faster processors, more, you know, those kinds of things in order to be able to even deliver the basic service. Now, I mean, remember not long ago whenever Intel would come out with a new chip and everybody was so excited about it, or a new version of an OS or something, because it opened up new things that you can do with the computer that you couldn't do before. And now, for the most part, you can pretty much do just about anything on a PC. So nobody gets super excited now when Intel comes out with another, you know, new chip or something like that, not like they did before. And this is something that I think that we think of startups as being companies, but I think that in most cases, the company is just a container, right, for an experiment. You know, they're not really companies, you know, have customers and revenue and all those kind of things. Most of the startups, all they've got is an idea, some basic, you know, technology that maybe a prototype or something like that, and they're just wrapped in a company structure, right? And so if you think about them more as experiments, right, then you can deal with the fact that if an experiment fails, you're all technical people, at least from the university here. If you do an experiment, and is there such thing as a failed experiment? You know, if you have a hypothesis and you thought it was, you know, you're going to have this particular result and you had another result, is that a successful experiment or a failed experiment?
All experiment is good because
all experiments.
Yeah,
you get a result.
Yeah, the many persons, especially at science now, let's say not show the let's say not proper way. Always publish only the results which convince the hypothesis. The problem is that not show the failure
Right.
in the hypothesis, and that is the very difficult things.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And what I'm suggesting here is it's just kind of a mindset about things, because you're not really a company until you've validated a lot of the assumptions that you've made and then converted that into some way to create value and capture value, right? And so an experiment shouldn't be thought of as a failure or not, but we think of companies being failures or not. And so it's just a mindset that you've got to be prepared to accept this possibility, and I think you all know that.
I think that was Edison who said that he didn't fail, he just found 1,000 ways that didn't work.
That's right, exactly. Exactly. And you know, the thing that just drives me crazy sometimes is, you know, in the US we've got Shark Tank and television shows like that, so it's very popular now to think of yourself as an entrepreneur. Tell people you got Steve Jobs, you got Bill Gates, you got all these kind of people. And people look at those examples and they try to follow this pattern, right? And the surest way to failure is to follow a successful person like that, right? Do everything that Steve Jobs did today, and you will fail 100% of the time. In fact, our memories are so short. It wasn't that long ago that Apple was almost out of business. I mean, they were basically bankrupt.
Yeah.
They had failed over and over. Well, technically they had a great product, but they didn't
couldn't
have
sell
any
it.
penetration in corporate world. You know, nobody had Macs, nobody had phones, and all that kind of stuff. They tried lots of things. There was these home things. And so we forget that now. We just see Apple as this, you know, I see it all the time with the young people coming out of university. I want to create another Apple computer or whatever like that. You have to kind of remind them, hey, you got to look at the whole story. Don't just look at the final page. You know, you got to go look at the whole story and examine these things and see what these failures really look like. So I often ask. So we've got some startup. Let me see if showing you. Who's got a startup company? Okay, fantastic. Who is with the university here? Okay, professors, students.
Lecturers.
I'm sorry?
Lecturers.
Lecturers, okay. And mentors? Mentors in the room?
Oh, one is downstairs talking with other business people. We'll come back.
Okay.
We're joking that we in those space we have a mentors who
Okay.
And that reality we have here the incubator.
Okay, super. Well, usually I'll ask if it's a group full of startup companies, is what stage are you at, you know, and just at the ideation stage or whatever, because sometimes you see startup companies that they come and they're looking for investment and all they have is an idea, right? And my point to them is ideas are really, really cheap. You know? In fact, everybody's got an idea, right? And ideas by themselves are worth this much money, nothing, right? And that's why, you know, not too long ago, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts here about Poland, but I see that like when I go to Korea, you know.
Okay.
Tell me your idea. Well, it's secret. You know?
Yeah.
Okay. We want you to sign a non-disclosure and all that kind of stuff. And they put so much value in that their idea is so unique. And now in the U.S., it's so open, right? Everybody shares things like that because you realize that the value is not in the idea. The real value gets created in the execution, right? And so I'd be interested, how is it in Poland?
The same problem, that still the people not understand that entrepreneurship is a sharing the ideas, sharing the capital, sharing the time. Because finally we have only three things needed to make the successful projects. Yeah, the proper people, they would like work together. They need to be trust between us, and the major problem in Polish ecosystem is trust between the companies. That we have the highest problem in Europe regarding the trust between the people at the companies and the trust company to the company. But everything about is a trust between the people. And finally, the trust to share the project idea between the inventor, because entrepreneur is need to execute, yeah.
Right.
But and capital, we have very aggressive capital. The people would like catch. There is not too much examples for the joint development, and that is major problem that we need to rebuild the ecosystem, which normally was formed in the other countries for the long time. And the major problem, generally, the business courses at the universities is about the books.
Yeah.
Not done by entrepreneurs, not done by mentors. Too many incubators, just space renting.
Yep.
And losing the capital for time spending together. Because there is a lot of governmental money, just not invest, just spend the money.
Yeah.
That's when you talk with the startups, sometimes they spend the money instead of invest.
Yes.
And that is major problem in the mental way. What is really startup and entrepreneurship? And those are the crucial things we need to also reverse in the let's say, brain mindset needed to create the proper ecosystem. That's observation from here.
Okay.
And we have a lot of very young, very successful people for the competitions. But the major problem is also working together due to the school system. Because we have not such advantage like Sweden and Finland, where the children from the beginning are learned to be a team project, leading one person, that is forming of the groups and the teams working together. Now, many children in Poland learn at home with the personal teaching, that losing time in schools and afterwards have additional classes, personal teachings. And there are the problems creates afterwards all of this risk sharing, the trust between the people and so on. And those are the things which, in our opinion, is the crucial to change the mindset in this area.
Okay.
I completely agree. That is why I really wanted Dave to come and to speak also at a university level and not just with business professionals that are already having startups, because it's a systemic issue in Poland, as you said. It starts at the school level. And if you don't have it in the primary school, at least you can maybe try to change, malleable students at the college level that need to learn what it is working at a team, what it is, and that's exactly what Dave teaches is, and I don't know if you didn't mention it here, but in Acton, you teach through case studies from the strategy side, but the team is really important, and we had a discussion. You can obviously, share your experiences on, why do startups fail? Well,
I'm gonna slide.
exactly.
Yeah,
So just a transition. So you'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So just a couple of points there, because first, Socratically, who doesn't agree with what he just said? Who feels like that's not the problem? Or has a different perspective on it? No?
It's fact.
It's fact. Okay.
Well-known fact.
Okay. So what do you do about it? How do you overcome that? What are you doing today to overcome that?
Oh, I can say what we're doing here as a place. One of my project was fall down due to the changes of the regulation and done by the government in the renewable energy. And afterwards, that is also difficult to agree that I do the default and false because someone changed the rules. Yeah, that's a big play at the personal, how to feel that it's not my problem that was somewhere, but how to change the let's say to make the proper progress. And we decide, as I mentioned to you about 2 years ago, that we need to create the system and try ask to the people to talk about the joint cooperation. The joint cooperation at the open spaces, that we doing the meetings here once a month in the idea, let's say, building the unique city. Because when you're trying to live in one place, the place must be unique for you. And that was the magnet, in our opinion, of the city. And we're trying to starting connect the people, because one of the major problems is also separation of the small teams. Like, let's say the university has a own incubator, the technical university, and we have the silos at the university that you don't have in the Western countries. The major problem is that many times the technical people trying to make the design, they do not understand the trends because we have arts in the totally different school. And the question is how to reconnect the people on the daily basis.
Yeah.
The problem, additional problem we observe and trying to solve, that is many times is the problem that making the meeting at the one place is very difficult, but why at those places, not others?
Mm-hmm.
We decide that we use those space because it's private, because it's a chamber of commerce, because we can sell neutral for the universities. Always compete. They say that not compete, but finally at the local levels, they always compete. They always compete, especially now in Poland, for the limited number of students. After very fast growth of the numbers of students, Now we have decreased natural things, but that means the money for the universities, and that are the ways and problems. And what we're trying also to do is invite the people like you and showing that there is another options. There's not only corporate development for the city. There is not option for the city to base on the corporate development.
Right.
Because the KPIs the people have at the city office now is only two: sell more land of the city and take more big investors. That means that is a completely disaster for the startups ecosystems. Because when the big companies come, they suck the people, yeah?
Yeah.
Especially the active ones and so on, and that's starting to be a corporate. To be a corporate and start again the startup, you need to accept the risk.
Yeah.
Corporates are, let's say, not accept the risk, generally speaking.
Yes.
There's only small divisions at the corporate level. There's R&D that is only accept the risk. Other parts of the big corporates doesn't tolerate any risk. There are the things which is very difficult. What we need to also understand and trying to show to all the colleagues in the city that we are too small to compete at the local level. We need to prepare our joint offer when we would like to go to the investors.
Yes.
Because, as you know, there is enough capital and even risk capital to invest. But that need to be the prepared projects on the proper level that the people, let's say, accept the risk to invest, especially in the new areas, new regions like Eastern Europe. Finally, we are talking about only 25 years of changes, that we are still Central Eastern European countries. Everyone is exciting about the many things what was happened, but finally there is something in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
As you say about Austin, the same is we could feel sometimes about Łódź, that all of the corporate companies now see in Poland Warsaw, Krakow, and Silesia region as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is about 7 to 10 million people living close together. And trying to find a way how to reconnect the ecosystem by the people and by exchange of the information, because sometimes the idea needs proper partners and so on. And only by the matching the people, that is the way. We need to try to redevelop the connections to go to the another stage. This is our opinion, what we are trying to do. And one of the examples that we make some small steps toward, let's say, receiving first results, that we create the joint agreement. It's like a partnership of all of the universities and also the Chamber of Commerce, and we call it lot schools of revitalization. But the revitalization, not the rebuilding and reconstruct the buildings, but how to revitalize the ecosystem that is, again, entrepreneurs ecosystem,
Right.
giving the chances. And this is our idea, what we trying to do here.
Good. Okay. That's great. I guess some great ideas there. I think that a suggestion may be to go do something crazy.
Yeah, that's
Right. Do
finally
something that makes people wonder, what are they drinking in Łódź to do something crazy like this?
Yeah,
right? To
that's
get that attention.
what type of mushrooms they eat.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And getting the whole community, like the corporates don't innovate very well. There's so much money and effort and time that goes into this corporate innovation programs and things like that, and they come up with signs that they put in the place. They give employees extra time to go do things, and they have committees to go look at innovation. They do lots of things like that. But companies just aren't really good at that. And the reason for it is they've optimized around building a product. They've done a really good, they were innovative, they created something of value. Then the next phase is to be very efficient at doing it so you can maximize your return for your investors. And when you do that, you hire people that are good at repeating processes, right? One after another. And that's a different set of skills than people that are out risking thoughts and ideas. They don't like risking that. They got investors that want that dividend every month, or they want that stock price every quarter to go up. And so what happens is you see these companies and their reports about their big R&D budget, right? But it's a little R and a big D. You know, they're doing very, very little research, and it's mostly just new product, and it's development, but it's really new product, or basically updating the old product is the development part of it. And so this is how this works synergistically with startups, right? So the startups then are really the innovators, right? These are the experiments, you know, that because if innovation is experimentation, right? Big companies don't like to do lots of experiments because it's expensive and nobody wants to risk their career on a failure, right? And so you do that outside the company, you do it in a startup community, and then let the big companies go shopping, right? Because that's what happens. There's no real viable way for companies, you know, unless you're a unicorn, and most aren't unicorns. There's no real viable way to monetize this except through an acquisition, right? And so that's how this system now works, is all the innovation really occurs out at the edge with these startup companies, right? And then the big companies are really good at identifying things that they could pull in and add to their product, and they acquire the company and they bring them in. Most of the time, the acquisition process kills, you know that. So there's even a lot of failures during the acquisition process that happen, but that's the way that the ecosystem works today. So the more that you can do to develop that early, get your corporations involved in working with the incubators and the startup companies, because what the startup companies need is a customer, right? And so if you match them up so that rather than me go with what's available, I say, look, I'm looking for a technology for autonomous vehicle, you know, and I put the word out to all the incubators that I'm looking for anything that will enable an autonomous vehicle or a UAV or life science technology or cancer research or whatever the case may be, then that's evidence, that's verification to these startup companies that, okay, there is a market need here that I can go after, and I'll risk my capital for that, right? But if you've got those silos built up, then there's lots of these experiments that are one-off. So we go invent great technology that goes into the library, you know, it's patented and it sits on a shelf and it never gets commercialized. To me, that's a failed experiment, right?
Yeah,
Just when you don't do anything with it. And so building that thing so it's a free-flowing exchange, you know, like at Capital Factory, we have companies come in all the time because they recognize that the next new thing isn't likely to come from their own lab, it's likely to come from some small company that is in the very early stages of development now, and they can influence that development, and they can do a pilot or a POC or some sort of a project, and there's no better way to get funding. You know, every company that comes and talks to me, they want funding, right? They're wanting some angel or risk money or whatever on their great idea. But there's no better way to do it than if a big company says, okay, I'm not going to invest in you, but I'll commit to buy your product, or I'll give you some, I'll pay in advance, or I'll give you some license in advance, or I'll pay you to do this POC. That's the best thing now, because now you're driving towards some objective. And so everything that you can do to make this system work, and you've got to sometimes force people, right? Too many times you get words, yes, we're committed.
Too many conferences
Yeah,
about
that's
the
right.
innovation, about
Yeah.
the startups community. That's it.
Yeah, the outcome of this conference is you're going to do a new conference, right?
Want to make sure, and do you guys know where POC is? Just because we're using it.
Oh, POC, proof of concept, you know, some sort of a project that proves that, hey, this might be a valid approach to solving this problem. Anything like that, that you're always wanting to advance the ball forward, you know,
Yeah.
American football terminology. You got to keep moving that ball forward all the time. And innovation and entrepreneurship is really about doing. It's not about thinking about it. It's not studying about it. It's doing, right? And I've seen people, and you've seen it too, they go off and they study things for a long time. They do market research, and they do surveys and things like that, versus just get out and knock on doors, talk to people, you know, try to close a deal, make a deal happen there, right? And that's so much more verification right? I could have a report that says, yeah, there's a good market opportunity, or I got a customer, which is better. I'd rather have the customer, right? So that bias for action is really, really important. And so when you have a conference or committee or get people together like that, hold people accountable. Let's make this happen. Let's put a date on it. Let's put an objective on it. Let's make sure we share our principles. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm preaching now. So, why do startups fail? You know, this is so. Logically, if you can avoid failure, that sort of equates to success, right? So largely in entrepreneurship and startups, success just means avoiding failure. So if you look at there's lots of reasons, you know, burnout, didn't use the network, lack of passion, all that kind of stuff. But really, why should you focus on anything more than just the top three up here? Three things. So now it's simple, right? Again, entrepreneurship is about simplifying complex problems. That's why I was asked yesterday, I spoke last night to women in technology in Warsaw. It's amazing, 60 powerful women in there that are doing, they're business angels, right? And boy, I was very intimidated, really. I mean, they were just absolutely incredible. And so the question is, well, how do you invest in these? What do you look for? What are the keys that you look for in investment? And you say you're looking for people and companies that are self-aware. They understand their market. They can explain. One of the questions was, what's the average pitch? You know, should you give somebody an hour or 30 minutes or whatever to pitch? And I was explaining, you know, I just did a judging for a startup competition at a conference in Austin called South by Southwest. It's an amazing conference. But we had companies from all over the world come in and pitch. And then one day I saw 50 pitches, right? It was a competition. And the first round was 3 minutes long. And you think, how could you possibly, you know, when I would be coaching the companies in advance, it's like, particularly the technical people, I can't explain how it works in 3 minutes. And you have to explain it. Nobody cares how your product works. Nobody. They don't care. Don't waste your time. Tell them what it does and what problem it solves. That's what they really care about. They don't care about the unique way, the really elegant way that you solve this problem. That's your own ego that you're dealing with there. Talk to them about their problem and how you're going to solve their problem. Then they want to give you another 3 minutes beyond that. But here are the three. I know you probably can't read this, but the first is no market need. The second is I ran out of cash. And the third is I have the wrong team, or I don't have the right team.
Yeah.
Okay? And so is that three different problems?
Yeah.
Or is that one problem with three symptoms? Or it could be maybe all.
Finally one, because when you have a proper team, you could have an investor, you could have a person who understands the market need. That is why that many times when the company is going for the new market like Africa or Asia, invite the people from the proper culture, structure. It's about how to form the proper team.
What do you guys think? Anyone else? Opinions?
Is this true? Do you find this to be true? These three reasons that you see companies failing?
Yeah, I mean, no need of the market is probably the biggest, and that's pretty obvious.
Right.
Inventors like to have ideas,
Yes.
which might be nonsense, yes, as a use kind of case.
Yeah. Well, it's not just inventors. Anybody can have a bad.
What you mentioned before was the proper timing, which is also quite important.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you can be late to market, but you can also be early, right? I'll tell the example. So I was with TI. We had mini computers. We had some PCs, micros, and things like that. And I recall very vividly, 1984 was the year of the network, right? Guess what? 1985 was the year of the network. 1986, because it always takes longer, you know, for things to arrive. You can predict, you can see things coming, you can see the opportunities. IoT, right? IoT, wow, that's going to be the next big thing, right? So companies go jump into it, and I got an IoT solution, and they wonder, where's all the customers, right? Gartner said that this is going to be a big thing. I'm here. It's an empty room. Where is everybody, right? And they're too early, right? They have a great product, great solution. They've done all this homework, but they don't have a customer yet, right? Yes, it's the same thing. The tombstone goes in regardless. And yeah, so to follow up with Ollie's question, what other things do you see? Any other failures that we're missing here that are critical for a startup?
What do you hear in Poland from friends or other reasons why companies
The
are?
concentration on making money and not solving the problem.
Okay.
Many companies think like, okay, we are here to make money. It's important, all right.
Right.
But they forgetting that the client and his problem is the biggest thing that they should concentrate.
I love you. It's great. Yeah. I see that all the time. And so, I have certain, after you do this a million times with startups and hear the pitches and stuff, flags start appearing, right? As the discussion goes on. And when the entrepreneur starts talking about how much money they're going to earn before they tell me what problem they solve, big red flag comes on, right? Or if they start talking about how this technology is really great and, how, elaborate it is without telling me about the problem. Because entrepreneurship at fundamental level is if you're not solving a problem, you're not going to be successful, period. People will not pay you unless you solve this problem for them. And so that no market need really says you did a bad job at understanding what the problems were. So you went and created something that you wanted to create, and you're not a good example of the market, right?
Concentration on the subsidies, not on the investment, because it's too many of the free money.
Yeah.
The free money is very tricky, especially on the regulation. That too many companies is concentrated about this free money, not on the market.
Yes.
And there is many innovative names of the projects.
Yes.
But nothing inside, but just to take the subsidies.
Yes.
And there is very difficult afterwards that the companies, when they're starting to talk with the real investors, they are not ready to talk with the investors because they say talking about spending money.
Yes. Well, and there's a saying in the U.S., maybe you're familiar with it, but it's the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Because the government officials, they have the best intentions. They want to promote entrepreneurship and economic development, so forth like that. But they don't know how to do it, right? So they make this money available, and money destroys as often as it creates. It spoils the companies. Now, I told you I go to Korea a lot. The government in Korea's got a big problem, right? The whole economy for the last 40 years is built on manufacturing ships and phones and lots of things like that. But now they got this big neighbor, China, that's disrupting their business model. And so they can't be competitive on a cost basis with Chinese, right? And so whenever I go and I talk to the companies, I'll talk to 100 companies. 95 of them will say, when I ask what's your value proposition, it's better quality, lower cost, right? And okay, how much better quality? Well, we use, give me some statistics, give me numbers. Well, we don't have the numbers, but we do better than the Chinese, right? And it's like, okay, well, you need to prove it. Just saying it, everybody can say they're. So how much lower cost are you? Well, we're lower cost than Americans. Well, but that's not the market, right? When you go to the U.S., people sometimes see the U.S. market as so much opportunity there, so much more money to be spent, stuff like that. But it's also the most competitive market in the world. Everybody's there trying to compete. So when you show up from Korea, you're not just competing against American companies, you're competing against Chinese and Taiwanese and anybody else there that's right? So you've got to be honed very well. You've got to understand. And if you can't be cheaper, you better be better, and you better explain why you're better. And if you can't do that, then don't even try, because you're going to waste a lot of your own time and effort and a lot of money in the process. So the government recognizes they've got this big problem that they've got to move up the value chain. And so they're promoted. They've got some great universities. They're investing in that. They're developing entrepreneurs, and there's lots of government money available to do that. But I see all the good that it does, but I also see some really negative consequences that come that hurt these companies. And what they do is, if you're a Korean entrepreneur, you get a grant. You don't even have to pay it back. There's no responsibility, right, to ever pay this money back. So it's like free money. And they become dependent on that, right? And so their goal changes from solving your problem to justifying the next money to come in, right?
Next subsidy.
Yeah, so, and the other thing is that if you got some device that needs some sort of a compliance certification, you need UL or CE mark, it costs money. You got to go to the lab and you got to pay money, $20,000, $30,000 sometimes to get these certifications. Government will pay for that. Just fill out the form, submit it, go through the process. You know, sometime later, a month, 6 weeks, 2 months, you'll get an envelope that's approved. Here's your check. They'll pay for it, right? It's great service for the entrepreneurs, but they just wasted 60 days or 90 days, right, to waiting for that. And so it creates this dependency model, and that works totally against entrepreneurship. You've got to have that independence. You've got to have that self-drive. You've got to have that motivation to make it happen. And speed is so much more important than anything else. That's the competitive advantage a small company has over a big company, right? You can't beat them any other way other than be more agile, right? And this takes the agility away.
Just a question, do you know of organizations that help implement, excuse me, government like programs or policies that would allow for flexibility? Because EU funds gave a lot of grants as well to interesting projects, innovative projects. But I have friends that are a great example where they got 1 million zloty to do their project. But in order to get it, they had to follow step by step exactly what they were told what they're going to do in order to spend that. However, in the process, they realized that they needed to pivot. The idea changed because the market needs were different, and they couldn't do it because they weren't allowed to, because they were so stifled by the process they had to follow. So guess what? They wasted a lot of money to do exactly what the EU, what they said, they told the EU they had to do, and then afterwards, they ended up, you know, after many time and resources, they ended up doing the platform that they're doing after the fact. But I'm just wondering, you know, I'm sure this incident must have been repeated in other places as well, and I'm wondering if there's, I don't know, I mean, obviously this is on the EU level, but almost some kind of policies, or if there's been programs built in other places in the world that you could somehow propose to, you know what I mean, to countries and to governments on having accountability, empowering, but not just giving, and also giving enough flexibility to change if that change needs to happen.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a tough thing,
But flexibility is against bureaucracy.
Yeah.
The bureaucracy likes follow.
Right.
To make the decision during and participate in the process, that means to understand the process. Mainly, they did not understand the process. They understand the rules they create, and afterwards, it's like a checkpoints. If something is wrong, you must pay the money back. And I know so many new instruments waiting in the labs, so many instruments waiting at the companies, just losing the money because they buy, not use, and they not need to sell because it's 5 years period to do nothing, and they just putting the report that is working.
Right.
And there are the problem that generally we're losing money, and the system of subsidies is only creating the let's say wrong things on the competitions, because one who receives money probably have advantage. But in the reality, finally wins those one who is not dependent on the we can say governmental bureaucratic money.
Yes.
And that is the major thing, is the too much concentration now on the subsidies against the market.
Yes.
And if we not find a way that the money should goes through the banks, and we have not in Poland very important instruments which work in the West. We're not having real investment banking. You can get any loan when you show your property.
Yes.
The risk of the bankers in Poland is 3 times your property less, that 1/3 of your properties.
Right.
There is the risk of bankers in Poland.
Sure.
There's no banking system risking with you as an entrepreneur. And this is the major lack, and those subsidies, switched from the subsidies to the investment banking, that could be like a great magic
Sure.
thing.
Yeah. So we'll talk about it in a minute, but understanding the value chain, right? The supply chain, of how things work, right? And so the government has a role to play because there are certain projects that are so big that no individual company can take that risk, right? Curing cancer, for example, is a good example. The U.S. space program back in the 60s, you know, the moon landing, right? That mobilized an entire, not just one industry. It wasn't just the space industry, but it was the semiconductor, electronics, and all the other things that went around that, right? So you had this big umbrella effect with this one program that was funded, and you held people accountable for an objective. Get somebody on the moon, right? Or doing DARPA, for example, for military things, and IARPA for the internet. You know, we wouldn't have that today unless somebody that was the ultimate, you know, risk taker, the U.S. government in that case, but, you know, the Polish government, the Korean government says, okay, this is a big national need that we have. We want to fund this big program, and there's lots of people that will have to collaborate around that, and there will be lots of spin-off technologies, a lot of intellectual property. There will be new uses of this technology that get applied, and so it has that effect, but it's not an instantaneous thing. You know, it takes some time to do that. When the government or any other place goes in and tries to interject themselves in places in the value chain that they're not able to do, that's not a core competence, right? So maybe they think about, well, we'll fund a certain number of venture capitalists, but we'll hold them accountable for a return. You know, we'll give them money there, but we want it back, right, with interest.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right?
so more of like having the government act more as almost like a VC, for example, as opposed
That's
to just giving money. So that's an interesting take on things, because obviously, like you said, my point wasn't not to give subsidies, because you need that, especially to build platforms or something that you just couldn't do as an MVP, you know, in the garage. But it's kind of an issue of the fact that, you know, people are good intentions, and you don't want to waste resources, but then you're stuck on a, like you said, on a bureaucratic point. So, you know, maybe these governments or these EU places have to think maybe a little bit more the American way, actually, in that sense
Well,
of
and it
how
comes
you
down
fund.
to human motivation, right? There's two things that make things happen: inspiration or desperation. And there's nothing more motivating to get the job done, get revenue flowing, get to profitability, than going home and explaining to your wife, you know, in my case, or your husband, that, honey, we can't pay the bills this week. We're going to have to eat bologna sandwiches instead of steak, those kind of things, right? Or we're going to have to put off having a child. Those kind of things motivate people to achieve something. If you take that off, then it's, yeah, we can take that vacation. We can do that. I can take the day off, you know. And that's why, like in our program at Acton, we work those students 100 hours a week minimum. They start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they usually go to about 11 o'clock at night. Doing their casework, we force group interaction, right? So you don't just individually go study this, and then you got to get with your group, 2 hours with your group before we get into the case study during the day, right? And then it's a bigger group. And we force those kinds of things because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you better be used to working 100 hours a week, at least in the beginning. That's your price of admission, right? That's your ticket to get into the theater, right? And hopefully it's like a lottery ticket. It will pay off, right? Maybe not the first time or the second time, but beyond that, right? And so you can I mean, you can do things to educate, like the government officials about this, you know, that we want the government to be involved, but we don't want you to waste money, right? We want it to flow to where it has the greatest impact, right? And sometimes you give entrepreneurs money and it takes the pressure off, and they need the pressure, right? There's a tension there that's important.
The questions about this, like, first of all, what's the difference between pivot grown back and feathered pivot?
Let's see, which one is the pivot gone bad? Okay.
And feathered pivot, the last one.
Well, so these are self-reporting. So, you know, you take a collection of, I think this was Forbes magazine, right? And they asked on what made you fail. So these weren't categories that they fit, you know, the responses into. These are self-reported from the startups themselves. And so this is the way they stated it. And so you can go and lack of passion could very well equate to being not the right team too, right? So you can have it doesn't add up to 100%. These are just self-reported reasons here. But
What's the difference?
there could be no difference. It's just the way they stated the response there, right? But this whole thing here, like no market need, it's kind of we did everything right, but there wasn't a market need, right? And you think about it, it's like nonsense. Right? What that really means is you didn't do a good job validating, you know, that there was a problem, that somebody was willing to pay for a solution, right? That's the real problem, and that could also be, you could maybe lump all that into the team, because if you had the right team, you could avoid those kind of problems.
Yes, you could recognize the
Yeah.
problem area.
Yeah, that's why I was asking you first, is that 3 problems or is that 1 problem? You know, in many cases, the manifestation, these are the way it's reported, but what's the root cause? Root cause is maybe because you had the wrong team, but you didn't follow the prescription of identifying a problem that you could solve and validating that people would pay you money. I mean, sometimes people solve a problem, but they do it in a way that nobody's willing to pay for it. Think of Twitter. Twitter's great. Everybody uses Twitter, you know. Donald Trump is the best user, right? But nobody pays, right? So how are they going to make money? How are they going to give a return to their investors from that, right? So that's a great question there. Is how do you? It's not just solving a problem, but it's monetizing that, right? And that's got to be validated too. Everything in the process has got to be validated, and you've got to challenge your assumptions. Well, we go into these things with this great idea, and we fall in love with it. It's like our little baby. You know, we have to protect it at all costs, right? And you've got to be willing to accept the fact that your baby may be very ugly. Right?
And, you know, that's what a business model is how do you capture the value and monetize it, right? So if you don't have a business model, like here you have lack of business model, well then I think it is related to the first part, is maybe you obviously didn't have the market need because you weren't able to translate the value enough, or maybe there is a need but it's not valuable enough for people to pay for it.
Right. Yeah, so the point of this is when you're, like, particularly if you're mentoring a startup company and they come and pitch their idea, you know, be skeptical, be challenged, you know, explain to me, tell me more about this problem and how that's going to be solved. And give me an example. Have you talked to somebody? You know, the problem, Capital Factory is great. You know, there's free food in there. There's, you know, there's even a beer tap and there's beanbag chairs. And, it's a really comfortable place, right? And there's amazingly smart people in there. And you can spend all day talking to brilliant people and come away just feeling really energized. And so when I talk to startups and they tell me about this stuff, and I say, well, who have you talked to? Well, I talked to this mentor and this mentor and this mentor and this partner and this VC and this angel. I was like, wait a minute, you know, your customers are not in this building. Your customers are out there, you know. That's where you need to be. Get out of this place. You know, this is a good place to come to sometimes, but get out of here. You know, if you see a startup company in an incubator, you know, or accelerator, and they're there every day, go kick them out the door. Get out there, you know, and talk to real people with real money that they're going to spend, real problems. That's where you learn from, right? Mm-hmm.
You asked about the Polish startup files the reasons. I heard that one of the difference between foreign pitches and Polish pitches is that Polish startupper brags about money, and foreign startupper offer opportunity to make business.
You have to change that, right? You have to force that. And you don't have to be mean, but you've got to be honest. And I've stopped people. I don't want to hear anything more, right? How many of you have listened to a 30-minute pitch of a startup company and then still have no idea what their business is about? Does that happen to you?
Yeah.
And time is the most precious commodity. I used to listen very politely through the whole thing, right? And then, I don't understand your business, and I was really, and now I'm less so. Maybe it's because I'm just a little more confident in myself. It's like, I owe it to you. But being kind to you is not helping you if you're an entrepreneur. I've got to be honest with you. And I got to be upfront and forceful about it, because I don't want you to fail. I want you to be successful. And if you keep talking like this and losing people, losing investors, losing customers, you're going to fail. You've got to get your message down. You've got to be very clear and concise. You've got to be able to validate it. You've got to show me proof. So in fact, are you familiar with the lean canvas? Everybody? Lean canvas? Okay, so the lean canvas, I don't have a real good example of it here, but a lean canvas is basically a business model, a business plan on one sheet of paper. There's 7 blocks on there that you've got to put information into about your company. What is the product? What's the value proposition? What's your competitive positioning? What's your revenue stream? How are you going to make money off this? And it's all on one page.
I can share it with you guys. So
Yeah.
I teach the Lean Canvas and the Business Model Canvas at the University of Warsaw Incubator.
Any examples available on the Google?
Yeah, you can Google it, but if you guys want.
Yeah, we will be in contact, and I think generally the people will need to understand that the idea must be clear.
Yes.
And as I spoke with some investors that saying that the real good business is that you could describe on the matches. Because it's only simple, there is not very big complicated Excel sheets showing the connections. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. We'll move on here.
Yeah, that's the only plus and minus must work.
Yeah.
When you have the idea that your costs and your proposition and people would like to pay,
Yeah.
is enough to make a business.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's finally the simple things. And important is how to find the idea on the proper project, proper products, and to put in the proper targeted market. I think that idea is very good now based on the Tesla. When the Tesla would like to, let's say Elon Musk would like to start with the cheapest electric car, I think that will never happen.
That's right.
Just to put to the market willing to pay for this added value. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and so Elon Musk he's a brilliant person, and let me give you an example of somebody that disrupts things just in general, right? So Elon Musk has this idea about the Hyperloop. You heard about the Hyperloop?
Yeah.
And so, do you know what it would cost to do the development on the Hyperloop? Billions of dollars,
Billions,
right?
yeah.
Billions, right? And there's some basic technology that has to be developed to get there. It would still cost Elon Musk millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to do this. So what does he do? He puts a $100,000 challenge out to universities, and he gets all these things. So I mentored a team out of the University of Texas called Guadalupe. We had 40 graduate engineers, mechanical engineers, aerospace engineers, software engineers, all kinds of engineers, right? All of them, every 40 were smarter than I was, right? And I was mentoring them. and they had to raise $30,000 of their own money. They entered this competition for SpaceX Hyper. And there were 80 teams around maybe the world contributing this. So Elon Musk, for a cost of $100,000, had hundreds of brilliant engineers working on his problem. And part of your agreement that you signed was he owns the IP. So you've got to give so much credit to somebody that has that much brilliance to come up with an idea like that, to get everybody to work for free for him.
That's
Okay, so let's move on real quickly here. So the other thing I coach people about is solve a real problem. You know, find something. There's so many problems in the world that we can solve, and you can solve, you know, some things that impact our society, you know, greatly, people's lives, business, you know, profitability, economic development. You can solve lots of things that contribute to that, or you can figure out, you know, how to put recipes, you know, up for grandma, you know, to make online and stuff like that. And so if you're going to solve something, go solve a big problem. Challenge people to think of bigger, right? Think beyond just something that's an irritant, because you don't want to solve a nuisance thing. Nobody really wants to pay for that, but they'll pay for big, hairy problems to be solved. You know, find pain. You know, pain is your friend. You know, if you find pain, you're going to find somebody that's willing to buy an aspirin or get cast put into an arm, or get a shot, or get a ingrown toenail or a tooth pulled. You know, that's what motivates people, is that feeling, that pain that I've got to relieve in there. And this pain is not just personal pain, it's business pain. Find the problems that people are having and go solve those problems, right? That's the key to this. And the more pain, the more blood that's on the floor, the more opportunity that you're going to have to be successful there. You're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah.
So this is the emotional side. A lot of times we think in terms of companies. I'm going to sell to this company, I'm going to sell this to that company. And I've been in business for a long time. I have never, ever seen a company buy anything. Companies don't buy stuff. People buy things. People do. Yeah. So you got to solve that pain is manifesting itself in somebody, some manager, some leader, some CEO of the company. He's got investors that are banging him on the head every day because he's got this problem that he can't solve. And if you go solve it for him, and you can map it to his safety need or his self-actualization need, and understand his motivation or her motivation for motivating that purchase, then now you've tied the left brain and the right brain together, right? I can prove it to you on a spreadsheet, and I can convince you that you're going to go to sleep at night. Your life is going to be better if you buy my product. So map that pain to some point of the emotional state of the people.
And just wanted to link it specifically to the main decision maker as well. One of the mistakes I made, even at the beginning when I was in sales at GE, is you think you're selling it and you have to sell it to a group of people, but ultimately there's one or two decision makers. And I was always surprised when I went back to these people and said, why did you choose the competition, right? Kind of a debrief. You know, they would tell me something that I thought, oh my God, if I had known that, you know, or somebody wanted a promotion or there was some kind of linkage, if I had known that, then I would have gotten the right resources together to either, you know, overcome that hesitancy or, you know what I mean? And
Yes.
so, even on like a strategic, complex selling level, there's even a whole selling. Miller Hyman has this great thing called conceptual concept selling. I don't know if you've heard of it. And the whole idea is mapping out the decision maker and what are, you know, conceptually, what is the wins for that particular decision maker. When you have that, you can so much easier make the sell as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's exactly the case there. People act out of their own self-interest usually. What % of the time do you think the best product wins the sale? I don't know the answer. What do you think? Most of the time? Is it 80% or 20%? Yeah, probably so. And that's, I mean, but there's this concept called satisfaction, right? So people don't optimize the decision. People don't look at every possibility. They look until something's good enough, it meets the bar, and then that's when things happen. And so that's why timing is so important, right? You got to be there first. You got to be convincing. You got to establish that your solution fits. Maybe make some modifications. That's selling. I don't want to go into that today, but selling. Well, maybe I've got the next slide here. I'm going to skip over this because I think you pretty well realize the importance of intellectual property.
Yeah.
But the next point is the bits, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. The best businesses are simple businesses, right? The more complex it is, the more chances you have of failure along the way. It's just pure connection theory.
There is important things in Poland because that calling the innovations. Innovations, many people understand, especially bureaucrats, there is something complicated. It's not the improving the business model to earn more for the less cost.
Yeah.
There is an innovation in general thinking. And for them, innovation, we just sometimes joking, will be the simple bicycle moving this selling point to the customers. And this is the innovation on their level. Too many times in Poland, we lose the money for the complicated innovation, bought by the companies not ready to be on those levels. The innovations should be on the level of the company achievements and development. And that is also very difficult problems from the structural level, but also motivated by these subsidies money.
Yes. Well, and when you're evaluating companies' business models, or you're thinking through, so when you're developing your business model canvas, 7 sections there, you got to state clearly what that is. And if it's very complicated, where I convince this person, but then something else will happen here, and it's a whole link of things that has to happen before a dollar gets generated, that's like advertising models and so forth. You got to create all this value over here, and then eventually get paid when somebody looks at an advertisement. Well, that's a pretty indirect link there, right? I'd much rather I send this product or I give this license and I get this money in return for it, right? The fewer links, the better. This is something that I want to impress on you strongly here too. What's that role of the entrepreneur? Because if you think about what is a business, they really only have 2 functions, or 2 active functions inside the company. And that is, you make things and then you sell things, right? That's it. You make them, you sell them. And if you sell them for more than you cost to make them, you make a profit. Business is really that simple. The problem with it sometimes is if you're heavy operations, and operations is development, it's R&D, it's all those things that goes into making and delivering the product. If it's heavy over here, what happens? What happens when you have your operations people running the company?
Product may not hit to the market.
What was the #1 failure? Right? Because the operations are trying to optimize it, make it most efficient. We want one color, we want one size, it operate at this speed, and you'll take it, and we want the delivery, we want the order 6 weeks in advance, we want time to build it, we don't want to take any risk, and they'll optimize it for that process, right?
I just wanted to summarize a little bit because we have a next meeting that we have to go to, but so much of what you had in your presentation we had during the dialogue. So if you could maybe in the next 10 minutes, summarize the rest of the presentation and maybe take it for any Q&As
absolutely.
we might have.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think we've already talked about the most important things here. I'll just say over here, if you let the sales team run things entirely, you'll kill this organization over here. They can't build enough things because every new customer is going to be the next big market, right? You'll find yourself doing way too many things. And there's a saying that startups don't drown. Startups don't starve to death, they drown, right? They try to do too many things, right? And you want to avoid that. So let me just run through global commercialization. There's big risk. Question really is how important is it? to go global. And for most companies, particularly in Poland, I think it would be important there. In the U.S., the statistic is that 95% of the U.S. companies never export anything. Right? It's a big market. They're lazy. They don't want to go. Why should I have to go somewhere else when I got plenty of customers here, right? And so it's very situational. What's your product? Does it translate well to the market needs somewhere else? But the point of all this is think about it up front. You may decide that you don't want to, or that you may want to in the future, but think about it first, because in many cases it has to do with your product. You've got to design in the ability to sell it on a global basis right from the very beginning. Maybe certifications and language support, various things like that. So think about global markets. And just a comment here about the value chain. We get so focused on the product itself that we sometimes forget that you can also have innovation and disruption in the value chain. So just as an example, think of Dell Computer. It's a big, now very profitable because it's private computer company that really doesn't innovate on the computers. It's just like everybody else's, but they've innovated in the value chain, the business model, and they've become very successful as that. So deeply study in each case, understand that, because the value chain looks different for every company. So study that and understand where there's disruptions. Where can you collapse areas of this inefficient delivery model that you have here to create value? Every time you can move cost or levels of control or inventory or anything out of a business model, you create value. And then focus your attention on the most valuable parts of it, and then outsource the rest. You don't have to do everything. A lot of companies go into this model that, hey, I've got to control the process myself all the way through. You don't have to. There's plenty of more efficient places where you get things manufactured, and I think you already know this. And we talked about that. Have a local partner. The message here is when you want to move to Germany or France or UK or US, find someone that has that local knowledge that can help your startups kind of guide through the process, avoid the potholes. There's regulatory, there's legal, there's relationships, there's lots of things there that are great reasons to have those partnerships. And then just remember, whatever got you to where you're at today will surely not get you where you're going to go. So you've got to remain open and nimble to change yourself, because what's working today almost surely won't work tomorrow. So, hey, I've had a great time today. Apologize for running maybe a little bit over time. So, questions, discussion?
What was the trigger to do that in Texas? Why it was Texas? Was it the subsidies there at the beginning, or what was the very beginning of the Austin kind of? I'm speaking about the tech environment. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think that it's like a petri dish, right? You put enough people, business people, entrepreneurs, technicians, and they naturally want to think about creating things and trying things, right? And so it's that concentration, and it was very unorganized at first, and happenstance, and there was a startup here but not there, and then kind of that continuing development it took time, right? And what happens is your original success breeds a lot more success, because the people that do a successful startup and make money, what do? Well, they go start another one, or they become the angels that start new things too, and they provide not only money, but they provide advice and suggestions and connections and things like that. So it's got to be built up from the petri dish until it grows into something. And you can do things to accelerate that, because there's enough models now that you can look at. Because it's an iterative process. There was lots of mistakes that were made along the way. But I think that, through what we're talking about today, we can help you kind of avoid all those things. You don't have to repeat all those mistakes, right? You can create your own mistakes, right? Yeah. And learn from those as well. But there's some core principles. Get the community involved and stop talking and start doing. Yeah. Right? That's the most important thing. Yes, sir.
Would you like to talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial mindset? mindset, sorry.
Okay.
Because in my opinion, this is the base for the whole problems in the startup phase.
The mindset of the entrepreneur?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think there's necessarily one mindset. I mean, what you've got to find or what you're looking for is passion about some problem and some motivation to go fix it, right? And some motivation, frankly, you want people that want to economically be successful as well, right? So there is money motivation, but that's not the only thing. It's like the combination of passion for the problem, the solution, the technology, the situation, but also a desire that there be a reward associated with that. And it may not be a personal reward. It may be for your employees and for your shareholders, that personal responsibility. If I take somebody's money, that I have a bigger responsibility now to you to make sure that I earn a return for you, right? And tie those two together, right? They have to be tied together.
I think just since I'm a millennial, I think what's interesting when I observe people, and I also teach at the University of Warsaw, is people want to become an entrepreneur because they think it's an easier and quicker way to become a millionaire as opposed to working at a corporation, for example.
That's the problem.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so going back to your point, what is entrepreneurial mindset? You have to love, actually the US Embassy, we did a really great web chat that was moderated. And one of the spokespeople says, love the problem, not the solution. Love the problem you're gonna solve, don't love the idea that you're gonna have money. Because actually, ironically, being an entrepreneur, your track to being rich is gonna be a lot slower than if you have a cushy job somewhere else.
So as I mentioned, this is the base problem for the startup phases. If you have the wrong mindset in this domain, so that means that you probably go wrong.
Yeah, well, that's where the market itself is. That's why when you do things that are artificial, like the government coming in and passing out money, they pass out money to bad people, bad motivations as well as good, right? Whereas people like a venture capitalist or an angel that's been there before, they can recognize that. If this person is just simply making a buck, I think their risk of failure is so high, I'm not investing in them. So they don't get funded, they don't move forward. And you allow the other companies that have that passion where they give back. When in the 80s and everybody was a yuppie and the stock market was going crazy and everybody was buying their BMWs and Wall Street was the movie and all that kind of stuff, it was all about the money at that point in time, right? And I'm surprised now when my MBA classes come in that more than half of them now are looking to do social good things, give back, do something to help, the world kind of thing, which is a good thing to integrate with solving that problem. You can't just give away, right? Then you're a nonprofit, right? And so if you're for profit, you can have that motivation to give societal good back. And I think that's something that is important to look for because that says that person's driven more by passion than a desire for a dollar.
That's actually a mindset that needs to come to Poland. Is a lot of people think they want to do good, but they think they have to do it for free. And one of the lessons I think that we can take from the US is, your business model can be as a result of helping others and doing good, right? And you can get paid for it. There's nothing wrong with that, right? So I feel like sometimes we have these two extremes in a way is people want to make money and want to have the business, or they think that you can do good, but you have to do pro bono.
Let me share a really quick example with you because my oldest son has special needs. He was born prematurely, lost oxygen. He's mildly mentally retarded. And so I do a lot of work. We have a community in Austin, and I'm on the board that works with people with special needs. And it's a community. We got 250 adults that live there. And they work, and we've got a gym, we've got horses, we've got an equestrian program, we've got Special Olympics, all these kind of things. And so we're always looking at how we can challenge these people, right? Because they want the same things in life that a normal person wants, right? They want to achieve, they want to accomplish stuff, they want to be happy. And so there's a person, his name is Randy Lewis. He used to be the VP of operations for Walgreens, which is a big drugstore chain in the US, right? And he was responsible for designing their distribution center. Randy had a son also like my son John, with special needs. And he thought, I want to design a facility that can be run with half of the people there being special needs. So he developed all the systems and stuff for Walmart's new distribution facility so it could be run with half the staff there with people with special needs, you know, using automation and so forth. And he succeeded. And it was such a success now that they've created this business leadership forum where their other companies are coming in and also saying, we want to build one of those too. When Amazon or somebody else is building a new distribution center, they can use these concepts and it operates. I mean, it's not like a giveaway to people with special needs. It operates very efficiently, more efficiently than most facilities because it was designed from the very beginning. And those are the kind of passionate things, you know, that drive people to do just incredible, amazing things. And so to find, they're rare, right? Most of us don't have that. I didn't create that myself, but you know, that passion of solving somebody's problem. You know, I find a lot of people that don't want to move into sales because they think, oh, it's just peddling things, right? You know, it's a bad reputation. It's like a used car salesman or something like that. And it's a mindset. You mentioned it earlier. It's a mindset. You're not there to sell something to somebody that doesn't need something. You're there to solve problems, right? And if you have that level of trust and authenticity, then you get to solve people's problems and get paid for it. And that's really what entrepreneurship is, right? Solve a problem, get paid, get rewarded.
And thanks for that. And actually, the one thing that if you are an entrepreneur, and I can mention some names to help, because I'm actually a high proponent of inclusivity and diversity, including people with special needs, because I'm also a mentor of some Polish students that have some handicaps. But if you're an entrepreneur and you hire people with that are officially, you know, somehow handicapped or have a special need, then you do get a subsidy of 70% for your business. So I would actually encourage that if you are creating a startup or a business, be inclusive and hire people that do have special needs, because you'll actually get funding for it.
This is not the whole truth.
Maybe
We
that's
can
what
discuss
we
it
can
later.
discuss it, but I would say encourage it. I know businesses that do. I know people that do. I know people that have special needs in it. So I'm personally very passionate about it because there's a lot of biases against people, and there's a lot of things that people with special needs can do that are somehow not included in society. And I feel that more in Poland, unfortunately, than I do in other countries, which is why I'm quite passionate about it.
Okay.
But we can talk about that
Yeah.
offline.
With pleasure.
Yes, I have a
Yes.
question. In the beginning, you mentioned the necessity of connecting people from universities with entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And in theory, we know this is necessary, yes, for the success. But it doesn't work, at least in Poland, it doesn't work that often. So what do you recommend? How to implement this effectively? Any programs, any hints how to implement?
Sure. Okay. So I would say first, figure out where the barrier is and then attack it with full force. And so there's things that you can do. For example, at UT, I mentioned that the Hyperloop competition there. So they have a class. It's for credit for the students, and it's multi-dimensional or multi-divisional. So you can be an engineering student or art student or a business student, it doesn't matter, but you get credit for doing a startup company. So you spend the whole semester bringing your idea, pitching your idea, forming a team, going through the whole process. People like me show up every Thursday night and act as your mentor, guide, make connections, things like that. And then at the end of the day, you get credit for it, right? And so that develops these skills, this appreciation for what entrepreneurship really is, so that it's not just seeing people on Shark Tank go and get a check from Mark Cuban, right? They get to see the pain process that you got to go through there. There's another thing, if you're not familiar with it, I would suggest you think about it, because we could do this right here at your campus. It's 3-day startup, right? And you go and start Friday and you work all week long until Sunday night. And it forces teams to go through all the steps, including the validation step, which is most important right there. Right?
Yeah, we're just thinking about such projects at the end of November.
Yeah.
To include, but the major themes will be to make the interdisciplinary teams.
Yes.
And that's their idea is to use the different spaces and incubators around the city to just form the teams that work the 3 days for commercialize product or services or something like that, and that will be one of the major things for the meeting and also our proposal to the society to go forward.
Yeah.
And one of the, let's say, fundamental lack probably regarding the problem mentioned before is the real lack of the chambers of commerce and powerful chamber of commerce. The US Chamber of Commerce, we know what does it mean.
Mm-hmm.
How the powerful in lobbying, in changing the things they are. The problem is that many times in Polish companies, they are not have enough power to change the regulation, to change the pattern, and that is important things for sure that is we're trying to also solve. And thank you very much. We have some startups here that maybe for the 3 minutes short introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were thinking that maybe those startups could also seek for your help and maybe present their technologies. Fortunately, the discussion here was so good, and there were so many questions that we are running out of time. So my idea is maybe right now, just at the end, people from startups may approach you and maybe ask some questions.
Or just for 1-2 minutes presentations themselves what they're doing. And there is an example for the 2 students can do. There is our invitation. Please remember about us and welcome again. Our student was done a nice project, invited the people from over the world, and that was project that was not very well recognized in the institutional way the students could do. And that is showing how 2 students could work closely and to do good things when they find a mentor, and that the mentorship was there. That is great situation. And now for 2 minutes for who would like to say something about the startups. I will be one.
How many startups do you have here today? Just one.
3.
3. Okay.
3. I think that also. Just for 2 minutes.
Let me offer something while you're coming up. Please
Okay.
come up. Let me offer something that maybe I could propose. Is when I get back to Texas, I can get a few of my other mentors or partners from Capital Factory, and we could set up a Skype session,
That's really
and we
great.
could give each of the startups, 15 or 20 minutes or something like that.
That's really
And
great.
we'll give you some really direct feedback there, and it won't just be my opinion, but I'll get some other people.
Yeah, we already know that was working. We have a special session based with New York with our colleagues in the new media and
So it
film
works.
production. That's Skype's works.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
maybe just right now, people from startups may approach here, and we can talk about how to do that. Meanwhile, I'll just mention that close to the door you have those handbook for entrepreneurs, Startup Smart. This nice book I just opened a couple of minutes ago. It looks good, so it's you can try it, and we got it from US Embassy. Thanks to them, you can take one copy for you, and that could be another help for you. Thanks once again.
Yeah,
Big
thank you
thanks
so
to Dave. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Okay. And just for
Sure,
short.
got a little mingling time here.
Yeah.
So maybe exchange contacts at least.
Yes.